Okay, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to look at Chapter 1, and we're going to start our introduction to Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is a crucial part of this class, and it deals with the personal computer and the hardware as it relates to the personal computer. So we're going to learn what a personal computer is and talk about what different pieces of hardware like the case and monitor and keyboard and mouse, and then the things inside of the computer that are important. Again, it is very important that you read and do these lessons. I am just showing the key topics and focusing on important issues in here, and it's really important that you read the individual lessons. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is our computer cases and the power supply. And computers come in two types, tower and desktop. And the desktop model is the one shown in the picture here, and usually the monitor would sit on top of it. Today, the most popular type though is the one to the right, which is the tower, and usually the tower is found beneath the desk, and on the desk we would just have the monitor, keyboard, and mouse. The case is very important to the computer system. It protects the internal parts of the computer, and it also helps to cool the computer too. So the case is an important part of that computer. One of the things to consider when you're looking at computers is the form factor. So the form factor is an important part of the computer, and the form factor, there are different types. One of the most popular ones is the ATX form factor, and that form factor not only is the case, but the power supply, the CPU, the motherboard, all those things within the computer case are important parts of our form factor. There are a couple different names for the computer case, and you'll notice here on the left you'll see it says computer chassis, cabinet, tower, box, and housing. When you are going to buy a case for a computer, if you're creating a computer from scratch, there are different things that are considered, such as the size of the motherboard, the internal drive, or the available space for different components. You might also want to consider if you will be doing future upgrades and how many expansion bays you might need within that computer. And then in section 2, one of the things that we want to look at is the size and available space that is for our computer. So again, you want to make sure that you do these little activities on the right. So here it talks about size. So remember that our computer case is important because of airflow and the components that are inside of it. How much space do we have for our computer? A lot of times desktop cases will be used if people have limited space in their working area, and they will have their monitor sit on top of that. Remember that when you're selecting your power supply, and your power supply is the internal device that supplies power to all the parts in the computer, such as the motherboard, the CPU, the drives, the optical drives, and all our expansion cards that we might add to our computer. And so power supply rating is very important. Appearance is an important function for a lot of people for computers. They want to make sure that if they are a company and they have a certain style they're following for their company, they're setting a tone, then they might choose certain cases that look a certain way. Sometimes we can determine what is going on inside of our computer by some status displays or LED lights that might be found on our computer. Sometimes they'll tell us if they're running, if there's an issue, if the hard drive is engaged. So not only is the monitor important, but sometimes there will be status displays on our case. And the last important thing is the vents. Our case will have vents that will allow it to dissipate the heat that's created by the CPU and other parts within inside of our computer. Power supply is one of the expensive components of the computer. We see a power supply here with lots of wires coming out of it. The one thing to note is this course does not train you to work on power supplies. Only if you are certified to repair power supplies should you ever open a power supply. They're very dangerous and could do severe damage to you. So it's important that you never ever open up the power supply. And usually our power supply converts our AC power to DC power. Most of the components inside of our computer will run on DC power. So that's the main job that it is going to do. Again, if you have an ATX form factor for your computer, your form factor should be the same for your power supply and other components within inside of the computer. And the power supply has many connectors coming from it, and they're usually keyed. And some of those connectors could be Molex, Berg, SATA, 20 pin or 24 pin, 4 to 8 pin, 6 to 8 pin. So it's important that when you choose a power supply that it has the right kind of connectors for the devices that you will be connecting to your computer. And then the second sheet here explains the different color coding of the cables that are connected to the power supply. So again, you want to make sure that you read these different charts and you understand that a yellow cable indicates a 12 volt positive cable, blue would be 12 volt negative, orange is 3.3 volt, and so forth. So make sure that you do, again, look at all of these slides and you study them. Another important area that you need to understand, which relates to the power supply and the different components inside of the computer, is the voltage that is inside the computer, and you want to understand the terms voltage, current, power, and resistance. Voltage, current, and power and resistance are electronic terms that a computer technician must know. And voltage is a measure of force required to push electrons through a circuit. Voltage is measured in volts, V. A computer power supply usually produces several different voltages. Current is measured of the amount of electrons going through a circuit, and they're measured in amperes. Power is a measure of the pressure required to push electrons through a circuit, the voltage, and it's multiplied by the number of electrons going through that circuit, and that's the current. The measurement is called watts. Computer power supplies are rated in watts. One of the major things that you will need to consider is your power supply must have enough watts to be able to supply enough power to all of the things that are inside of your computer that you're going to be running. The next term is resistance, and resistance is the opposition to the flow of current in a circuit, measured in ohms. Lower resistance allows more current, lower resistance allows more current, and therefore more power to flow through a circuit. A good fuse has low resistance or almost 0 ohms. To the right, you'll see in figure 1 ohms triangle, V over I times R, and that's the equation that you should know, and that's going to help you on some of the questions on the test. And another thing is you want to know P equals VI. And here's a Ohm's law chart. So again, look at these. And then this is the inside of a power supply capacitor. I'm not sure why they show us this, but again, you never want to open one of these up. Those capacitors store electricity and could cause damage to you or your computer. And again, here's a worksheet, and you want to make sure that you take a look at this worksheet and you try to solve some of the questions that are here. And this is where we will stop in this lesson on power supply and the computer case.